What is your definition of the middle of nowhere? Is it this? Or is it this? Or is it even this? I mean, if you don't feel wanted, if you feel isolated, you can be in the middle of nowhere, even if there's a lot of people around, even in social situations. But the thing is, if there are ghosts around, you might want more people around than just yourself. Regardless, what is your definition of the middle of nowhere? Put it in the comments below. Let us grab a blanket, turn off your lights. For true scary ghost stories that happened, well, actually anywhere. Middle of nowhere, children of Death Valley. Alright, so here it goes. This is the story of something I experienced which I cannot explain. What I am about to describe happened over a year ago, but a close friend of mine has convinced me to finally put it on the internet for others to ponder. Maybe someone can help me make sense of it. This friend and my wife are the only two people who know about this until now. I would like to make sense of it, but it's not something that I can just talk to people about. Let's start with a little bit of background before you ask, what the heck are you doing in the middle of Death Valley alone anyways? I have two professions. I am an army officer and I am an adventurer. I do outdoor stuff often as a way to recharge and refocus, because leadership does not come naturally to me as an introvert. Being in crowds is bad enough. Organizing, training, and leading crowds using every last drop of charisma is something else entirely. That's why I get away as much as possible. I seek out places of beauty and solitude, which allow me to rest internally, even if it requires physical exertion to get there. If you're heavily introverted like I am, you know what I'm talking about. So, in the summer of 2015, I just returned from Africa, where I was on orders. I was drained. I had to get away. I quickly planned a trip through Death Valley. I would take my street-legal dirt bike 1,500 miles over several days through the hottest place on Earth during the hottest time of the year, just because I knew it would be the most peaceful and relaxing place I could access. Now, I did mention that I consider adventuring a profession of mine. That's because I spent countless hours adventuring, exploring, just escaping. I consider myself highly skilled at that, and it is also a paid occupation for me because I document most of it through monetized channels. Now, with that being said, I have seen some unusual, disturbing, and just plain cool things while I'm out and about, especially in the desert. Scavengers that will stalk you for miles, hoping you will drop dead and become a meal. Caves which appear to be man-made, hundreds of miles from anything. Traps set to immobilize vehicles or people. Old military equipment. You just see a lot of stuff when you're out there. Generally, it all makes sense though. On this adventure through Death Valley, however, I saw something that just didn't make sense. I've been riding all day through Death Valley. It was very hot, easily over 120 degrees, and there were very few people out there that day. In fact, I hadn't seen anybody for about half of that day, since heading towards Ubahiba Crater, but did see one couple in a Mustang, just leaving Ubahiba Crater when I got there. That was it. It's not surprising though, because of how hot it was, and how far the crater out is from anything else. I headed towards Racetrack Playa, and stopped somewhere between Ubahiba Crater and Racetrack Playa for the night. This is very far from anything, and only accessible by gravel road on one end and unmaintained horse trail on the other end. There was nobody out there. So for obvious reasons, I unpacked my sleeping stuff and had a meal before the sun went down. I took all of my camera batteries out and hooked them up to charge for the night. I also turned my phone off and put it on the charger as well. I left all that stuff by the bike, which was just off the road. I set up my sleeping bag a distance away from the bike and the trail. Now, I wasn't expecting anybody to come by at all, but it was just part of my tactical plan in case some random bad guy stumbled upon my area. My bright red bike would obviously draw all the attention, and my camouflage sleeping bag would go undetected, allowing me time and freedom to maneuver on any bad guys. I took all of my camera batteries out and hooked them up to charge for the night. I also turned my phone off and put it on the charger as well. I left all that stuff by the bike, which was just off the road. I set up my sleeping bag a distance away from the bike and the trail. I wasn't expecting anybody to come by at all, but it was just part of my tactical plan in case anything happened. I got in my sleeping bag, bringing only my camelback, my folding knife, and my red light tactical flashlight. Everything else was at the bike. It was very peaceful. It was almost silent out there. It was warm, felt really safe, and was pretty easy to sleep. However, when you're out on your own, you never sleep very deeply. Your mind stays alert and stays ready so that little things wake you. That night, there was really nothing to wake me. It was nice. Until about 2 a.m. That's when the event happened. I woke up to the sounds of children. Yes, children. In the middle of friggin' nowhere. Here I am being woken up by children talking. I was fully enclosed in my sleeping bag, so for a moment, I just stayed still to try to figure out what the heck I was hearing. It kept going. The undeniable sound of children talking to each other. I couldn't make out what they were saying. It sounded like it was off 50 meters or so. I called out, "Hello?" Still in my sleeping bag. It stopped, just for a moment, but continued. Now, I knew for sure there had to be kids out there, in the middle of nowhere. I sat up, peeking out of my sleeping bag, and turned on my flashlight. I scanned in the direction of the noises, which was the opposite direction of the trail and my bike. There they were. 2 kids, 50 to 75 meters or so out, opposite direction of the trail, middle of nowhere. They were walking, kind of wandering, looking lost, sounding lost. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but it had a tone of discussion, like when you're deliberating to figure out what to do or where to go. I called out again, louder this time, "Hello?" They stopped. They looked in my direction, but they were looking past me, in my direction, but not at me. Like they heard me, but I wasn't even there. I was illuminating them with a very bright flashlight. They should have been covering their faces, but they were just scanning, like they were looking for me and just didn't see me. They turned back, kept walking, and I just watched them, not sure of what to do. Their noises and their images faded into the distance. I just sat there. I didn't know what to think or what to do. It was just so bizarre. After a while, I laid back down and just relaxed until it started raining at about 5:30 a.m. That's when I packed up in the darkness and continued my adventure into the morning. So that's what I saw. I saw children in Death Valley, over 100 miles from friggin' anything, just walking, talking, wandering, then vanishing. Oddly enough, it didn't freak me out at the moment. I was more confused than anything. That's why I couldn't make a decision on what to do in that moment. Now, looking back, it is freaky. I had originally posted this in Let's Not Meet, but someone commented they felt it was paranormal, so the post was deleted. Someone there said it could have been from a family camping nearby. I don't know about that. Why would anyone let their kids go wandering for miles without flashlights on a nearly zero illumination night on 2 a.m. in the morning? Their campsite would have to be well hidden too, because I didn't see anything out there before it got dark or the next morning. Fear like no other. I was told y'all might enjoy this story by the people over at Reddit. The truth is here, so here you go. It was December 2003. My parents and I were at my grandparents' house. The house is in deep South Louisiana and was very out in the middle of nowhere. We were there for Christmas, and the house was so full, so I slept in their fifth-wheel camper. It was about 2 to 3 a.m., and I hear my grandparents' Great Danes barking up a storm. I look out the window, and I see them chasing a small black object about a foot tall. It's darting back and forth, leaving these dogs in the dust. So it darts under the fence and stops right under my grandfather's repair shop light. It goes from being about a foot tall straight up to well over 6 foot tall. It was thin, but not frail. It didn't have facial features that I could see. It was like looking at a shadow. It wrenched its back and screamed at the dogs. I can still remember the sound and the feeling it gave me. The dogs ran to their kennel. They didn't come out for 2 days. Then it turned its head towards me. Even though I couldn't see its eyes, I knew it was looking dead at me. Then it bolted into the woods faster than I'd ever seen anything on 2 feet move and disappeared into the woods. I was so scared. I didn't go into the woods for years. Woods I grew up playing in, woods I knew. I have plenty of other stories from family members who have seen similar things in the same area, and will be making a post with as many as I can get together. Sorry for the horrible grammar. I worked in an older sawmill in the middle of nowhere. I started my career working in sawmills back in 2007. I was hired for a portable sawmill in southwest Washington state. This mill was located quite literally in the middle of the forest. It was constructed in the early 70s, and even in the short 30 years of its life, it seemed to have a decent amount of history inside of it. I worked the weekend graveyard shift, 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. the following day, on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I was a trim drop operator. I had a partner who I worked with, and we were the only two in the area. His name is Pete. We would take turns rotating through the night. One of us would run the drop, where you would drop out bad boards, chunks of garbage, and just about anything else that couldn't be made into quality lumber. The boards that would be left to be processed would enter a luggage chain system and then be pulled through a scanner and then a trim box that would cut the lumber to length and then take them to the next area, which was the sorter. The other of us would sit at the operator's console, about 20 feet away, and watch monitors that displayed various parts of the machine and process flow. We rotate every few thousand boards to keep from being fatigued. One night, I was running the drop, and Pete was kicked back at the console station, reading away at the newspaper. Everything was going just as normal as ever, when I glanced over and noticed him peering up at the monitor for the outfeed with a puzzled look on his face. He jumped up and went walking down to the trimmer sawbox and looked around it at the outfeed. He then walked back looking quite concerned, sat down, shrugged, and started reading again. This happened a second time, and by now it had my attention. I threw up the skids to stop the flow of lumber and walked over to him and asked him what was up. There was a guy standing at the outfeed. I went down there to see what the hell was going on, and when I got over, he was gone, he said, with a confused look on his face. This didn't make sense, because this was an area that wasn't accessible unless you stop the machine and activate a catwalk that unfolds from the outfeed of the sawbox to allow access to a small platform on the opposite side of the machine as we operate it from. I asked him to point out where this guy was hanging out. Pete pointed to the platform, slightly frustrated. I shook my head at him and laughed, before running back to the drop to continue running lumber. Pete stayed fixed on the monitors now, newspaper folded up and thrown to the side. Not but 5 minutes go by before he jumps up and runs down to the sawbox outfeed again. This time, I threw the skids up and followed him. By the time we got there was nothing. He pointed across the lumber table, which was 30 feet wide, to the platform across the machine and yells, "Who's over there?" You're not allowed to be over there, god damn it! Both of us waited to see the man he had seen on the monitor, but once again, there was nothing. After a minute or so of looking on, we decided to move back to our stations. I walked by the console station, glancing at the monitor, seeing nothing, and Pete followed shortly behind. By the time I made it to the drop to start running again, Pete hauled. I snapped around and saw him stabbing the monitor with his finger, yelling for me to come look. I ran over and looked into the monitor. Sure enough, there was a guy. He was standing on the small platform Pete had pointed out. The monitor is small, grainy, and black and white, but we were able to work out that this guy is wearing a tin hard hat, a very dirty and worn up bun long sleeve, with the sleeves either ripped up or rolled off, and very thick denim jeans of a dark color. He was just standing there with his elbows on the handrail, looking on at the lumber from the sawbox. "Wait here!" Pete yelled, as he stealthily snuck down to the outfeed once again. As he closed in on the outfeed to catch this guy red-handed for being in an area you can't or shouldn't access while in operation, I looked back and forth at Pete and the monitor. About the time Pete made it to the sawbox, the man on the monitor looked up into the camera and literally just faded away. I completely lost my shit. I felt a cold chill run down my back, accompanied by all the hairs on my arms standing up. I sprinted as quickly as I could to see Pete, exclaiming, "That ain't a guy! It wasn't a fucking guy!" Pete just stood there, dumbfounded, both of us now looking on at the platform with our own eyes. "What should we do?" I asked, quite disturbed now. Pete crossed his arms in thought, before deciding we should call our foreman down and tell him this story. We walked back to the operator station, and Pete grabbed the mic of the radio and called for the foreman. We ran until he arrived, both of us ready to bolt for the sawbox in case we saw the entity again. The foreman showed up after about 5 minutes, and we stopped running and explained what had happened. The foreman didn't look impressed, but he was smiling. He explained that we had just seen one of our old-timers. Back in the late 70s, we had a man who worked there who ran the chip bin station, and one day, arrogance got the best of him, and long story short, he got buried in a chip pile and was crushed and suffocated before help could dig him out. The foreman said he was one of the only people to ever work here and wear a tin hard hat, as homage to his previous career as a logger in the woods. Other operators have had occurrences where they've witnessed this entity wandering around different machines, seeming just watching the flow of lumber. I've got a few more, if anyone is interested, but in any case, let me know if you've got any questions. Thank you for hearing my story. Do you think this man was a ghost? So, this happened in November of 2015. I was driving at midnight with my sister and my boyfriend at the time. We're driving down this dark country back road. It's like 30 degrees out. The road is all curvy and stuff. So, I see something way up ahead, but it's foggy and dark. I think it's a sign on the side of the road, since the road is curvy. I get closer, going maybe 35 to 30 miles per hour. I notice it's a friggin' man standing on the yellow strip of the road. He waves his hands, and I get a bad feeling. My initial reaction is to go, so I step on the gas and speed past him. He yells, "Yo!" or something like that. He was wearing a flannel long-sleeve shirt. Maybe it was red and white or something, maybe brown and white. He was maybe middle-aged, beard, winter hat, jeans, and work boots. He had a white and red lunchbox. He seemed like he was getting off to work, but he was literally in the middle of nowhere, no houses, just woods all around us. My flight response kicked in, and I got the hell out of there. We got to where we wanted, got out, and saw the stars. This was all the same road. A few miles down from him, no roads to turn off or anything. We didn't see any cars go either way, so we head back home. Still see no cars. We get to where he was, and he's nowhere in sight. No cars have passed us at all, and this is a long stretch of isolated road with nothing but woods on both sides for miles. No houses. Nothing. If he left, he would need to take a car, which we would have seen. So he's not there. But his hat is. It's lying in the middle of the road. Now here's the real kicker. I have a dash camera. It was rolling the whole time. I get home to review it, and of course, that 3-minute time frame is missing. I have right before him and right after him, but not the part where we saw him. It even had like 3 days before that, when I went to Philly. Had it not been for the fact that my camera magically didn't pick him up, I'd assume he was just a normal hitchhiker. But why was just this part with him gone? Could not find it on my camera at all. I watched everything multiple times, and it always still skipped over him, no trace at all. My sister and boyfriend both saw him, and actually my ex wanted me to pick the guy up. Me and my sister said hell no. I refused to pick up some strange man like 30 minutes away from my house, out in the middle of nowhere at midnight. No thank you. Even if he isn't a ghost or paranormal, that's just asking for trouble. Anyways, what do you think he could have been?